Hi everyone, Brendan Little here again for today's instalment of 100 in 100. Joined for a joint session with Richard today, and we're going to be just briefly talking about the full development appraisal and the exit. So we've got to our last pillar within the 9 pillars of the full development appraisal, and we are going to be just discussing the considerations of your exit strategy before you've done the deal. We are going to add obviously a lot more detail to that as we go through the other stages of the life cycle, because it's a stage in its own right. But it's more about identifying what things to look out for and considerations during the appraisal process. So prior to doing the deal, because the exit is going to affect potentially the structure of the deal, and ultimately what you're looking to achieve to see whether it's viable for you or not. Because if you don't have your eyes on the exit during this period, then you may find yourselves getting involved in deals that don't necessarily meet your requirements or are in alignment with your objectives. So ultimately, without teaching you to suck eggs, there's really only 2 ways that you can go in terms of the exit. Obviously, that splits into subsidiary exit strategies, but you can either look to trade the units or look to hold the units, and ultimately that comes back down to whether you're looking to produce assets that will give you a regular income, and then potentially, for the long term, go increase in value, and provide something for a little bit later on in life. Alternatively, you're looking to produce capital that you can then use to inject into other business ideas, other business interests, other deals, etc. So very much dependent on what you're looking to achieve, and obviously there is the kind of hybrid between the two. But ultimately, you should have a good understanding of that before you got to this stage, because obviously you're going to be sourcing deals that kind of fall in alignment roughly within these areas. But Richard, from your point of view, where you see developers that don't really consider the exit and they just secure deals, generally speaking, it's difficult to reverse, isn't it? They're taking on a lot more risk than they need to.
Yeah, I think what people don't get generally is well, they end up not agile enough, because at the full development appraisal stage we should consider the implications of every exit, even though it's not your preferred exit. So as Bryn's suggesting, is we should look at what the deal would look like if all of the units were kept because we either wanted to or we needed to, or they're sold because we either wanted to or needed to. So whilst you're quite right, you're going in sourcing opportunities that are the right type, right size, right location for what it is, whatever path you're on, what you're looking to achieve. You must still be agile. You must have flexibility within the deal in order to actually respond to the market, really. So I mean, particularly in times of when the market's uncertain, then it's not a great time to sell. When the market's warm and hot and etc., it's a great time to sell. So actually, it's a great time to sell, even if you were thinking of keeping, if the market's gone up 5%, 10% since the project started, because it could then release you more cash to even get into other projects and keep even more units. So I think when people don't consider it at the FDA stage, the full development appraisal stage, they'll need to show their funders, both sides anyway, selling or keeping. But you've got to do it, because it is de-risking, most definitely. And yeah, most of you will know that I'm personally anyway more of a trader. I am a trader, and I'm quite happy to keep on trading. But I do see the benefits more from Bryn and the rest of the family and all that sort of thing. From the legacy side, I see the benefit of holding stuff, but I also see the negative side of that as well. But anyway, back to the FDA. is you need to take whatever schemes you're taking through an FDA as a keep or a sale, and the combination will fall somewhere in between. And the other thing that you need to do in terms of the FDA, and we talked about numbers the other day, is to make sure that the numbers you're putting in on your exits are realistic, and also look at the contingency on that. So, you know, generally a downward contingency, you know, we typically always use 5%, you know, so whatever the state of the market generally is, where we'll always say, well, okay, what does that deal look like if it's 5% off? You know, so if the revenue is 5% less, so whether it's trade or hold, and you know, that just gives you a secondary feel of how strong that might be. But you know, from an exit point of view, as I say, yeah, you can be very clear going into the deals, but you've got to be, you know, fairly flexible coming out, because the exit, as Brim would say, is, you know, it's not crystallized. The profit or whatever it might be is not crystallized until, you know, the money comes back in. So the sale or the refinance or whatever it might be, and the key also is knowing when you're debt free.
Tipping point. Yeah, I mean, paper profit's nothing. Paper profits are like monopoly money, effectively. It's only until you realize that potential that it actually means something. And I think it's understanding, yeah, getting how much work have you got to do and over what time scale, and to you get what's called the tipping point, which is getting out of debt. And obviously, I'll give you a quick example of that, but an oversimplified example, just to help you understand what we mean. Now, the numbers in reality are probably slightly different to this, because you've got to consider things like tax and things like that. But if you're dealing with a 10-unit development of, say, £200,000 houses, then you've got a £2 million GDV. If you're working on a 20% margin of your GDV, then you're looking at 400,000. So and your units are £200,000 value. So how many of the units have you got to sell before you've got rid of all of your debt? And then you're just looking at your profit is basically tied up, and ultimately then you've got those units to sell to realize your profit. Well, £400,000 profit is two £200,000 houses, right? So it's a 10-unit development. So you've got to sell 8 houses before you get to your tipping point. So it's things like that during the appraisal stage that you need to consider in terms of how confident you are and over what time scale that you feel that you'll be able to sell those 8 units. Because if you've allowed 2 months to sell the 8 units and it takes you 6, then that's going to have a knock-on effect in terms of your finance costs, and that £400,000 profit isn't £400,000 profit anymore. It's, you know, a lot less potentially. So then that involves you, you know, having to either look at keeping some of the units. What does that look like in terms of where your tipping point is? So if you've got a £400,000 profit and you're going to leverage them against some commercial loans or buy-to-let mortgages, for example, how many deposits will £400,000 get you? And that might reduce your tipping point to, say, 4 units. So then at least you know, that might not be your primary exit, but at least you know, well, as long as I sell 4 units, the worst case scenario is I refinance or I finance out onto buy-to-let mortgages and I keep the unit. So I'm not, so effectively I am out of a short-term debt and still in a bit long-term debt, but that's obviously mortgage debt, so can consider to be fairly good debt from that point of view. So that then obviously will take you would take a view on that in terms of what properties you're looking to develop. Because if you're looking to develop 800 or £1 million houses, then you're not going to be able to refinance them and rent them out. And if you're looking at a small development of 4 houses, 5 houses, whatever, and they're all £1 million, and that's a 5 million GDV, and you're going to make just over the million. 1.25 million, something like that. How many units you got to sell? All of them. So you've got to sell absolutely all of them until you make any profit. So it's about the point about looking at the exit to this level during the FDA stage is purely to assess the risk that you will be taking on moving the development forward.
Yeah, I think it's about, as we will talk about at some point in the future. It's about that gut. It's about that feel. Go through all this process, but the exit is for a lot of the reasons we've already outlined, is key, obviously. But people don't focus enough on the exit, and just very briefly, slightly off piste, as it were, is they don't put enough effort into the exit either. Lots of people have moved on to the next project and expect that the exit's going to be the exit, whether they're chasing the refinance or they're trying to sell it. The amount of projects that go they lose margin because people have lost interest at the wrong point. They've effectively, if it's a football team, they've left the strikers, the agents, or whoever it is selling it, they've left them without any support. So they ain't going to get any service. So they're not going to get it. And believe me, the amount of money that gets left on the table or falls off the table because people forget about the exit and how important it is. And back to get what we said. Nothing's crystallized that profit. We've got tens of millions of pounds of paper profit floating around our pipeline, if you like, but it's up to us to deliver that, isn't it? Or a fraction of it even, but we can't spend it, can't take it to Waitrose or whatever and say, well, next year I'll have some money, so can I come and pay you next year? Don't work like that. I know that's a bit of perhaps a silly way of looking at it, but please don't ignore the exit and the fragility of exits, whether it's taking a fully build to rent stance, which is obviously a common phrase these days. Whatever I do, I'm going to keep them all. Well, actually, circumstances might change for you or in the market that actually say, do you know what? I can't afford to keep them anymore. I've got pressures or whatever it might be, or I've got wants, not just pressures. So it comes back to that. So whatever you do in the FDA is make sure that you explore the exits as full as you can to the extremes. Trading all and keeping all. Don't worry about the middle bit because it'll be a mishmash of both. So if you look at both of them and both of them are pretty sound, then you're okay.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think final point for me on that is it's not just about looking at taking the development through to build out and trade and or hold as well, because we see it a lot with people that just want to wrongly coin the phrase planning gain. They want to take the planning gain and they want to sell it on the planning uplift, using the correct terminology. So often people will do the numbers based on you selling it with planning. But then they don't really do forensic numbers on what it is actually going to take to build out and what it would be to trade or hold or sell, etc. And then what basically left with is a proposition that's unattractive to a buyer, and then they're forced to build it out, but actually they haven't done the numbers, or they're not equipped financially, or they haven't got the right resources or what have you around them to actually make that a reality, and then they end up with a problem. So yeah, that's that on exit when it comes to FDA. Hopefully you found it useful. This is number 40 in our 100 and 100, so still plenty more to go. And next session we'll be diving into step 3 of the development life cycle, which is secure, and looking at ways of negotiating and taking a viable deal and hopefully securing that so we can move it through the process. So thanks very much.
Yep, take care.